She brought her lover into our home and sneered at me. Look, this is what a real man looks like. 3 minutes later, that so-called real man was on the floor, gasping for dignity, and she didn't know where to hide her face. That was the night everything changed. For weeks, I had sensed something was coming. The way she whispered on the phone, the smug smile she tried to hide, the way she staged little arguments in front of the kids just to make me look weak. I knew she was planning something cruel, something designed not just to hurt me, but to humiliate me in front of the people who mattered most, my children. What she didn't know was that I was already preparing for her little theater show. I wasn't walking into her trap blind. Before I continue, if you enjoy stories where cheaters get what they truly deserve, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Trust me, this ride is just getting started. Let me rewind a little. I'd been married to my wife for 12 years. We had 2 kids, a boy and a girl, and I'd always put them first. I worked long hours, fixed things around the house, showed up to every school event I could. I wasn't perfect, but I was steady, reliable, the guy who held everything together. And for some reason, in her twisted mind, that wasn't good enough. She wanted a spectacle. She wanted to shatter my pride. The first time I suspected something was off, she started dropping comments about how other men worked out more, dressed better, acted tougher. At first, I brushed it off, but then she started pushing the kids into it. Don't you wish your dad was a little stronger? Don't you wish he looked more like this actor or that guy at the gym? That wasn't just disrespect, that was poison. She was planting seeds in their heads, trying to make me the villain in my own home. I kept quiet. I smiled when she mocked me. I stayed calm when she tried to provoke me. But behind the scenes, I was working. Every morning, I was running, hitting the gym, hitting the heavy bag like it owed me something. I wasn't trying to be some Instagram bodybuilder. I was sharpening my edge. Not just physically, but mentally. I knew the day would come when she'd push too far. And then it happened. One Friday evening. She insisted on hosting a family dinner. She cooked a fancy meal, lit candles, even dressed up like it was some kind of celebration. The kids were excited. They thought it was just a special night. I knew better. The way she kept checking her phone, the smug little smirk on her lips. I could smell the setup a mile away. Right as we sat down to eat, she stood up, cleared her throat, and said, "There's someone I want you all to meet." She walked to the front door, swung it open, and in walked this guy. Tall, flashy, muscles showing under a too-tight shirt, and the kind of grin only a fool wears when he thinks he's the main event. My kids froze. My son dropped his fork. My daughter looked confused. And that's when she did it. She looked me straight in the eye, smirked, and said the line she had probably rehearsed 100 times in the mirror. "Look, this is what a real man looks like." The air went silent. Even the kids didn't know how to process what just happened. Her words weren't just meant to sting, they were meant to gut me, to break me down in front of the people I love most. But instead of rage, I felt something colder wash over me. Control. Calculation. The moment I had been waiting for had finally arrived. See, she thought she was setting the stage for my humiliation. What she didn't realize was that I had been preparing for this exact performance. And the ending? It was mine to write. The room was so silent you could hear the clock ticking on the wall. My wife stood there, proud of her little performance, waiting for me to break. The kids were staring at me, their faces confused, searching for some kind of answer. And the man she dragged into my house. He puffed out his chest, smirked, and looked me up and down like I was already defeated. "Yeah," he said, his voice dripping with arrogance. "Now you see what she's been missing." I didn't move. I didn't flinch. I just sat there, steady as a rock, letting his words hang in the air. Because here's the thing, silence is heavier than shouting. And right then, I wanted him, and her, to feel the weight of it pressing down. Finally, I stood up. Slowly, calmly. And when I did, his smirk faded just a little. See, she hadn't told him that I'd been training, that I'd been working, that I wasn't the man I was 6 months ago. He expected a broken shell. Instead, he was staring at a man who had been waiting for this exact moment that I walked around the table and stood just a few feet away from him. My kids were holding their breath. My wife's smile twitched, just for a second. "Is this your plan?" I asked her, my voice low and steady. "To bring a stranger into my home, into my children's space, and call him a real man?" She opened her mouth to snap back, but before she could, I turned to him. "Do you even realize what you walked into? You think you're standing tall right now? You're just standing in another man's house, in front of his kids, pretending to be something you'll never be. That struck a nerve. He took a step forward, like he thought he could intimidate me. That was his first mistake. Because the second he invaded my space, I acted screaming. No wild brawl, just precision. I grabbed his wrist the moment he reached out, twisted, and used his own weight against him. 1 second he was smirking, the next he was stumbling, off balance, hitting the floor with a grunt that shook the room. The kids gasped. My wife froze that I didn't hit him. I didn't need to. All it took was that one controlled move to show everyone in that room, him, her, the kids, who was really in control. He scrambled, trying to get up, but I kept my stance calm, towering over him. You want to play the role of a man in front of my kids? I said coldly. Then stand up like one. But understand this, you will not disrespect me in my own house. His eyes darted to my wife, looking for backup. She just stood there, pale, suddenly realizing this wasn't the script she had imagined. He finally managed to get up, brushing off his shirt, trying to save face. This isn't over, he muttered, trying to sound tough. Oh, it's over, I shot back. For you. It ended the second you stepped through that door. The kids weren't scared of me. They were staring with wide eyes. But there was something else in their gaze now. Respect. For the first time in weeks. Maybe months. They looked at me not as the man their mother had tried to tear down, but as the father who stood tall when it mattered most. That I turned back to my wife. She still hadn't moved. This is the example you wanted to give them? I asked, nodding toward the kids. This circus, this humiliation? You wanted them to see their father broken? Instead, they just saw who I really am. Her lips trembled, and for once, she had no clever remark, no insult ready to fire. The man shifted uncomfortably by the door, clearly unsure if he should stay or run. And I just stood there, calm, collected, in total control of the wreck she had tried to stage. Because this wasn't the climax. This was just the opening act. What she didn't know was that I had much more than strength on my side. I had evidence, preparation, and a plan that was going to dismantle her game piece by piece. Tonight was just the beginning. The man lingered by the door, trying to put on a tough face, but the truth was written all over him. He was rattled. My wife, on the other hand, was fuming. Her face had gone pale, then red, then pale again, like she was running through every possible comeback in her head, but couldn't find a single one that fit. Finally, she snapped. What are you doing? You think you scared him? You're pathetic, that's what you are. You've always been pathetic. Her words cut through the room, sharp and venomous. And for a second, I saw my son flinch. That was her weapon, not fists, not strength, but poison that dripped into every sentence. She had gotten so used to me standing there and taking it that she didn't realize the rules had changed. I didn't yell back. Instead, I pulled my phone from my pocket and tapped the screen. The living room filled with her voice, a recording I had saved from a week earlier. He's so clueless, it's almost funny. When I bring you over, he'll finally see what a real man looks like. I can't wait to watch his face when I tear him down in front of the kids. The blood drained from her face. Her own words, clear as day, echoing through the house, she tried to turn into a stage. The kids turned their heads toward her, eyes wide, searching for some kind of explanation. But there was nothing she could say. The evidence was undeniable. That I lowered the phone. Pathetic, I said quietly. You call me pathetic while you rehearse speeches behind my back, plotting how to break me in front of my children? That's not strength. That's weakness hiding in a costume. She opened her mouth, then shut it. Even the lover by the door shifted, like he suddenly wanted no part of what he had walked into. I took a step closer to her, keeping my voice calm, steady, controlled. You wanted a show. You wanted a stage. Congratulations. Now you're the one under the spotlight. My daughter whispered, Mom, so soft it barely carried across the room. But it was enough. My wife's eyes flicked toward her, and for the first time that night, I saw a real panic flicker across her face. That's when she tried to flip the script again. He's manipulating you, she shouted, waving her hands like a desperate actor whose lines had been forgotten. Don't believe what you heard. He set me up. He's always been a liar, and now he's dragging you into it too. But the problem with lies is that they crumble under their own weight. And she had built too many. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I just pressed play again. Another clip, her bragging to a friend about how he'll never see it coming. and how she couldn't wait to watch him break. Every word cut deeper than anything I could have said. The kids weren't looking at me anymore. They weren't even looking at the lover. All their focus was on her, their mother, the person who had tried to turn them against me. And now they were seeing her without the mask. She screamed, a desperate, wordless sound, and shoved the table so hard a glass toppled and shattered on the floor. "You think you're so clever, don't you?" She yelled that I stayed calm. "No," I said evenly. "I just came prepared." The silence after that was heavier than anything before. My wife's plan, her grand performance, had collapsed in front of her audience. And the worst part for her was knowing this was only the beginning, because I had more recordings, more proof. And tonight was just the opening act of a very long show. The glass shards still glistened on the floor when she suddenly spun around toward the kids. Her whole face twisted, and the venom that had been aimed at me for weeks now turned straight toward them. "Do you see what your father's doing?" she screamed, pointing at me with a shaking hand. "He's trying to trick you. He's always been weak, always been a coward, and now he's using lies to make you hate me." Her words hit like lightning, but not in the way she expected. The kids froze, their eyes darting between us. My son's lip trembled, like he wasn't sure what to believe. My daughter's hands gripped the edge of the table so hard her knuckles turned white that I knew right then. This was the moment she had been building toward all along. She didn't just want to destroy me. She wanted to rewrite who I was in my children's minds. That I took a breath, steady and controlled. "Kids," I said softly, kneeling down so I was eye level with them. "I need you to listen carefully. I've never lied to you. I've never hidden who I am. And everything you just heard, those weren't my words. Those were hers. Her own voice. You know the truth when you hear it." Before I could say more, she cut me off, her voice shrill. "Don't listen to him. He'll make you believe anything. He's trying to steal you from me, don't you see?" Her desperation was like gasoline thrown on a fire. The more she shouted, the more the kids shrank away from her. It wasn't me tearing her mask off anymore. It was her ripping it off herself. My son finally whispered, his voice breaking. "Mom, why would you say that about Dad?" The room cracked open with that question. My wife staggered, like the words themselves had knocked the wind out of her. She tried to recover, tried to fake indignation, but her voice shook. I didn't mean it like that. You don't understand. He set me up, but kids aren't stupid. They might not understand legal jargon or manipulation tactics, but they know when someone they love is lying. And right then, they saw through her. The lover by the door, still awkwardly standing there, decided to pipe up. "Maybe we should just shut up." She snapped at him, her mask fully gone now. "You're useless." And just like that, the man who was supposed to be her shining example of a real man was reduced to nothing in her eyes. His face burned red as he muttered something under his breath, then reached for the doorknob. He wanted out, but I stopped him. "No," I said firmly. "You came here to play the part of a real man, right? Then stay. Let the kids see what that looks like when it all falls apart." He froze, caught between the shame of leaving and the fear of staying. My wife glared at me, trembling with rage, but there was nothing she could do. Her perfect little show had crumbled in front of the very people she wanted to impress. The silence that followed was suffocating. My daughter finally spoke, her voice small but sharp. "I want to stay with Dad." My wife whipped her head toward her. "What?" I said, "I want to stay with Dad." My daughter shouted now, her voice shaking but strong. "You're mean, and you lie, and you tried to make us hate him. That broke something." My son nodded quickly, his eyes wet but determined. "Me too. I want to stay with Dad." Her face went white. For all her planning, for all her scheming, she hadn't seen this outcome. She thought she could bend them, twist them, poison them, but kids know love when they see it. And they knew I wasn't the villain in this house. That I stood up slowly, my chest heavy but proud. I looked at her and spoke with a calm finality. "You wanted to break me in front of them. Instead, you just showed them who you really are." Her lips moved, but no sound came out. For once, she was the one left speechless, and I knew. This was just the beginning of her downfall. The tension was unbearable. My wife stood frozen, her chest rising and falling with ragged breaths, her face pale. My kids pressed closer to me, like they had finally chosen their side once and for all. And then there was him, the so-called real man she had dragged into my home. He lingered by the door, shifting his weight like a kid caught sneaking into someplace he didn't belong. He tried to puff his chest out again, but it was useless. His earlier confidence had vanished, replaced with something that looked a lot like fear. Maybe I should just go, he muttered under his breath, his eyes darting between us. Go? I said, my voice sharp but calm. That's it. You walk into another man's house, disrespect his family, and now you think you can just slip away without consequence. He swallowed hard, but I could see his pride fighting with his common sense. He didn't want to leave like a coward, but he didn't want to stay and face me either. My wife shot him a look, not the loving kind, but the kind that said she was furious he hadn't lived up to her script. Don't you dare leave. She hissed at him. Stand up to him. Show him who you are. Her voice cracked, desperate. But he didn't move. I took a step closer, and he backed into the door like a trapped animal. Let me make this very clear, I said evenly, my eyes locked on his. You don't belong here. You never did. And the only thing you've shown tonight is how quickly you crumble when faced with the truth. For a second, he tried to muster some bravado. He opened his mouth like he was about to throw an insult, but then, crashed, he tripped on the same toy car my son had left near the door earlier. His arms flailed, and he went down hard, catching himself against the wall with a loud thud before sliding halfway onto the floor. The kids gasped, but then my daughter let out the smallest laugh she couldn't hold back. My son snorted. Even I had to fight the urge to smirk. The so-called real man scrambled to his feet, brushing himself off, his face crimson. This isn't over, he spat, but the words were hollow. Oh, it's over, I said coldly. It ended the second you stepped into this house. He yanked open the door and stormed out into the night. But fate wasn't done with him yet. Just as he stepped onto the porch, he slipped again, this time on the wet doormat, and stumbled down the front steps. Right at that exact moment, my neighbor was taking out his trash. The neighbor's eyes widened. Then he burst into laughter. Rough night, huh? He called out. The lover didn't answer. He just staggered down the sidewalk, clutching his pride like it was slipping through his fingers. The sound of the neighbor's laughter followed him until he disappeared into the dark. Back inside, silence settled once more. My kids looked at me with wide eyes, both of them struggling to hide their smiles. My wife, on the other hand, looked like she'd just watched her empire collapse. Her real man had just left like a punchline, and her own children were no longer fooled by her games. That I turned to her, my voice steady. That's the man you wanted to put above me? That's who you thought could replace me in my own home? She didn't answer. She couldn't. The only sound in the room was the faint hum of the fridge in the kitchen, the kind of silence that carries more weight than shouting ever could. I gathered the kids close. Go to your rooms for a bit, I said gently. I need to have a word with your mother. They nodded and slipped away, glancing back at me with a mixture of pride and relief. For the first time in a long time, they weren't afraid. They knew I had them, no matter what. When the door to their rooms shut, I turned back to my wife. Her eyes were wide, her hands shaking, the bravado gone. She had no audience left to perform for. Your little show's over, I told her quietly. But don't worry. The real performance hasn't even started yet. And in that moment, I saw it. The first flicker of fear in her eyes. The house felt different once the door slammed shut behind her so-called real man. For weeks, she'd been working toward that night, rehearsing every line, every smirk, every insult. And now it had all collapsed in a matter of minutes. She slumped into a chair, trying to gather herself. You think this changes anything? She hissed. You think you've won because you embarrassed him? You're still nothing. You're still you. I didn't rise to it. Instead, I walked calmly to the counter and picked up a folder I had left there earlier. Thick, heavy, weeks of preparation sitting quietly in my hands. You know what's funny? I said, flipping it open. While you were busy plotting to humiliate me, I was busy preparing for when this marriage finally collapsed. You thought I was blind, but I was documenting everything. Her eyes narrowed, but I could see the twitch in her jaw. That flicker of fear again. I spread the first set of papers across the table. Bank statements, credit card bills. Her signature splashed across purchases that had nothing to do with the family. Designer clothes, fancy dinners, weekend getaways, all under her name, all logged, all dated. Every dime you spent behind my back. I said quietly. Tracked. Every account you thought I wouldn't notice. Locked down. Every lie about money you told me. Recorded. She reached forward, snatched at one of the papers, and tried to tear it. I let her, because it didn't matter. Copies were already secure, with my attorney and stored digitally. Her face flushed, and she spat. You think this scares me? You won't take my kids. You won't take my house. I cut her off with a look so sharp, she actually stopped mid-sentence. You already lost them, I said. You lost them the second you tried to turn them against me. And this house? This house belongs to the one who keeps it standing, not the one who tries to burn it down. Her hands shook. You can't. Oh, I can, I said, pulling out the next set of evidence. A thumb drive. I slid it across the table. Voicemails, texts, conversations you had with your friends about this little plan of yours. You thought you were clever. You thought nobody would ever know. But guess what? Everyone's going to know. Your family, your friends, your lawyer, the court. Her face went pale. For the first time that night, her mask didn't just crack, it shattered. You wouldn't, she whispered, her voice trembling. You thought tonight was my humiliation, I said evenly. But tonight was just the preview of yours. The silence after that was deafening. She stared at me, wide-eyed, realizing she wasn't holding the cards anymore. From down the hallway, I heard the faint creak of a bedroom door. My son peeked out, his face full of worry. I forced myself to soften, to step away from the table and kneel down to his level. It's okay, I told him gently. Go back to bed. Everything's fine now. He nodded slowly, glancing once at his mother, then back at me. He didn't need words. The look in his eyes said enough. I trust you. As he disappeared back into his room, I stood tall again and faced her. You spent weeks trying to turn them against me, I said. But the truth has a way of finding its way through lies. And now, the truth is all that's left. Her lip trembled. She didn't scream this time. She didn't throw a glass or lunge at me with insults. She just sat there, silent, staring at the pile of evidence in front of her like it was a ticking time bomb. And I smiled. Because she had no idea that the blast radius was bigger than she could imagine. Why the next morning, she was scrambling. She hadn't slept. I could hear her pacing the hallway half the night, muttering to herself, trying to piece together a new plan. When the sun came up, she was already on the phone, dialing one person after another, her voice dripping with fake outrage. He set me up, she whined into the receiver. He's lying to the kids, turning them against me. You don't know what he's really like. I sat at the kitchen table, sipping my coffee, calm as ever, because I knew exactly what she was doing, running to her safety net, trying to paint herself as the victim before the truth could spread. But here's the problem. I had already made sure the truth would spread first, before she even picked up that phone. I'd shared the recordings with the people who mattered most, her parents, her siblings, a few close friends. Not edited, not twisted, just the raw truth. Her voice mocking me, bragging about tearing me down in front of the kids, laughing at the humiliation she thought she'd caused. When she tried her, he's making it all up, routine. It didn't land. One by one, I could hear the conversations unravel. Her tone would get sharper, more frantic. No, that's not what I meant. You're taking it out of context. Don't you dare judge me. Every call ended the same way, with her slamming the phone down harder and harder. By noon, she stormed into the kitchen, her face red, her hair a mess. You think you're so smart, don't you? Sharing those recordings? You think that makes you some kind of hero? I set down my coffee and looked her straight in the eye. I don't need to be a hero. I just need the truth to be louder than your lies. She clenched her fists. You've ruined me. Do you even realize what people are saying about me already? I leaned back in my chair, calm as ever. I don't need to imagine. I know, because they've been calling me. Not to shame me, but to tell me they see the truth now. Your own parents told me last night they're ashamed of what you tried to do. That landed like a punch. She stumbled back a step, her mouth falling open. They said that. I nodded slowly. They did. And they said something else too. They don't want you around the kids until you get your life straightened out. So tell me, who exactly do you think is still on your side? She blinked fast, her composure slipping. The kids, who had been lingering quietly in the living room, peeked around the corner. They didn't need me to explain. They'd heard every word. Her face twisted, and she lunged toward them. Don't you dare listen to him. I'm your mother. I'm the only one who cares about you. My daughter took a step back, her voice small but strong. No, you're not. Dad cares. He's the only one who cares about us. That broke her. She froze, shaking her head, unable to believe the words had come from her own child's mouth. You wanted everyone to see me as weak, I said, standing tall now. Instead, everyone sees you for what you are. And trust me, it's not a good look. She spun on her heel, grabbed her purse, and stormed out the front door, slamming it so hard the windows rattled. But I didn't chase her. I didn't need to. Because the more she tried to fight, the more she sank deeper into the pit she had dug herself. As the silence settled, my phone buzzed with another message, this time from a cousin of hers. Heard everything, it read. We're with you. Stay strong. I smiled. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't the one on the defensive. She had lost her power. The stage she built for my humiliation had become her public downfall, and this was only the beginning of the storm. She didn't stay gone for long. By evening, the front door slammed again, and there she was, storming back into the house with a new kind of fury in her eyes. Her phone was clutched in her hand like a weapon, her jaw set tight. You think you've won? She spat, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. You think embarrassing me in front of some family members changes anything? You don't get it. I'll take you to court. I'll take the kids, and you'll be left with nothing. The kids, sitting quietly on the couch, stiffened. My daughter's eyes widened with fear, and my son's fists balled up at his sides. That was exactly the reaction she wanted. Fear, confusion, doubt. But I didn't give her the satisfaction. Court? I said, calm as a stone. Good. Let's go to court. Let's put everything out in the open. The recordings, the texts, the spending habits. Your lover. Your own words bragging about tearing me down in front of the kids. You really want a judge to see all that? For the first time since she walked back in, her voice wavered. Judges. Judges always side with the mother. I stepped closer, slow and deliberate. Not when the mother's the one destroying her own family. Not when the kids are begging to stay with their father. Not when the evidence is stacked so high it blocks out the sun. She flinched, and I knew I'd hit the mark. Still, she pushed forward, desperation leaking into every word. I'll tell them you're violent. I'll tell them you scared the kids. I'll say whatever I have to say. The kids gasped. She had just said the quiet part out loud. She wasn't fighting for them. She was fighting for herself, for control, for her pride. And this was the moment I had been waiting for. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. With a tap of my thumb, her words played back, crystal clear. She had forgotten. The recording feature was still running. I'll tell them you're violent. I'll tell them you scared the kids. I'll say whatever I have to say. The sound of her own voice filled the living room. My kids looked at her, horror in their eyes. Her face went pale, her lips parting as if she could somehow claw those words back out of the air. But it was too late. You just handed me the final piece, I said quietly. The one that proves to everyone, the court, the lawyers, the kids, that you're not fighting for them. You're fighting for yourself. She stumbled back a step, shaking her head. No, you can't. But the kids didn't move toward her. They moved toward me. My daughter clung to my arm, and my son planted himself at my side. And just like that, her last weapon, fear, slipped from her grasp. She sank into the nearest chair, her hands trembling. For once, there was no yelling, no cursing, no wild theatrics. Just silence. Because she knew the walls were closing in. I leaned down, I level with her, and spoke in a tone so calm it cut sharper than any scream. You tried to make this a game. But games have rules. And you broke them all. Now, it's not you who decides how this ends. It's me. The clock ticked loudly in the background. She didn't respond. She couldn't. And in that silence, I realized something powerful. She wasn't my opponent anymore. She was already defeated. The only thing left was to make it official. The next step was court. And that's where her empire would collapse completely. The courthouse was buzzing with quiet whispers, the kind of nervous energy that hangs in the air when people know something explosive is about to unfold. My wife walked in first, head held high, pretending like she still had control. Her lawyer trailed behind her, carrying a stack of papers that looked impressive but meant nothing. I walked in with my attorney and my kids by my side. They weren't scared anymore. They weren't confused. They were steady because they knew the truth. When the hearing began, her lawyer went first, painting me as the villain. He used every cliché in the book: unstable, controlling, unfit father. My wife nodded along with every word, her smug smile returning like she thought the performance would save her. But then it was my turn, and my lawyer stood up, calm and confident. Your Honor, he began, We'd like to present a few exhibits." He plugged in a small speaker and pressed play. And there it was, her own voice, echoing through the courtroom. "He's so clueless, it's almost funny. When I bring you over, he'll finally see what a real man looks like. I can't wait to watch his face when I tear him down in front of the kids." A murmur spread through the room. My wife's face went pale. She shifted in her seat, eyes darting around like a trapped animal, but it didn't stop there. Clip after clip played. Her laughing with friends about how she was going to humiliate me. Her mocking me behind my back. And finally, the most damning one of all, "I'll tell them you're violent. I'll tell them you scared the kids. I'll say whatever I have to say." The courtroom went silent. Even her own lawyer looked down, ashamed to be sitting next to her. I didn't need to say much after that. The evidence spoke louder than any speech could. Then came the part that mattered most. The judge looked at my children and asked gently, "Who do you want to live with?" The room held its breath. My daughter spoke first, her voice steady. "With Dad." My son followed without hesitation. "With Dad." My wife gasped like someone had punched her in the stomach. She reached for them, but they didn't move. They stayed planted right where they were, next to me. The judge nodded solemnly, then turned back to the record. "Given the evidence provided and the children's clear preference, custody will remain primarily with the father. Visitation rights for the mother will be limited until further review." My wife's mouth fell open. She looked around the room like someone had stolen the ground out from under her. The smug smile, the arrogance, the power she thought she had, gone. All that was left was shock that I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. I just placed a hand on each of my kids' shoulders. Steady and strong. As the gavel came down, sealing the decision. I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. The woman who tried to break me in front of my children had just destroyed herself in front of the entire court. Her grand performance ended with her own voice betraying her. And for the first time in years, I walked out of that courthouse not as a broken man, but as the father who had stood tall, fought smart, and won. Walking out of that courthouse felt like walking out of a cage I'd been trapped in for years. The weight on my shoulders, the constant second-guessing, the endless games she played, all of it was gone. For the first time in a long time, I could breathe freely. Life didn't magically become perfect overnight, but it became mine again. I moved forward with focus. The kids and I built a new rhythm. Dinners filled with laughter instead of arguments. Weekends spent on adventures instead of tension. We started to feel like a family again, only stronger than before. That I poured my energy into something new. A business I had dreamed about, but never had the courage to start while married. With my kids cheering me on, I built it from the ground up. Long hours, hard work, but every step was worth it. And the best part? They got to see it happen. They saw what resilience looks like. As for her, she drifted further and further into the background. The friends who once cheered her on turned their backs when the truth came out. The lover who was supposed to be her real man never showed his face again. And she was left to deal with the wreckage she created, but I didn't waste my time hating her. I didn't need revenge anymore. I already had it, in the form of peace, success, and two kids who knew without a shadow of a doubt who their father really was. One evening, months later, my daughter said something that stuck with me. She looked at me across the dinner table and said, "Dad, you're the real man." And in that moment, I realized everything had come full circle. Now, looking back, I sometimes wonder, did I do the right thing? Was I too harsh or not harsh enough? Did I go too far, or was it the only way to protect my kids and myself? So I'll ask you, listening to this story, did I do the right thing? What would you have done in my place? If you want to hear more stories like this, stories of betrayal, revenge, and justice, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Hit that like button, leave a comment with your thoughts, and let's talk about it. Because trust me, there are plenty more stories where this came from.